What's going on YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book review. This time we are going to continue our coverage over the Ultimate Marvel Universe, where we are going to pick up with Ultimate X-Men once again and cover the last story from the Ultimate X-Men run. This story is a 4-part story called Absolute Power, where we get to learn a little bit more of the origin of Colossus, Cyclops, Charles Xavier, and even Wolverine as well in this universe. We then get the chance to learn what happened to Jean Grey after the Apocalypse storyline. So let's go ahead and dive into the last story for Ultimate X-Men, Absolute Power. I do hope you enjoy today's video. The story starts off in the past, where we get a small detail about Colossus when he was a kid. This is where we learn that Colossus worked on a farm with his family, and it seemed like he had a normal life, except when he goes to milk the cows, out of nowhere a bunch of bullets randomly appear. Luckily, at the very last second, young Colossus turned into his metal form to protect him from the bullets. This is where we learn that Colossus' powers manifest when he was a young kid, but he hid his powers from his family. Except apparently word got out to the mob that there is a mutant on a farm that can turn his skin into a form of metal. And this monster, Anatol, and I really hope I pronounce his name correctly, offered Colossus a job when he is ready to make real money. This is where we jump into the present day, where we pick up with the X-Men playing baseball. And this is a usual thing the X-Men do to pass time. And this is another common thing that both Ultimate Marvel X-Men and main Marvel Universe X-Men share. Baseball is used as a way to pass time. Except this leads into the moment where you have Iceman appear trying to tell the other X-Men to run. And then he falls and shatters into a million pieces. The reason why is because the X-Men are about to fight against Alpha Flight, and this is the first time we get introduced to Alpha Flight in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now, Alpha Flight is basically the Canada version of the Avengers. Canada wanted their own team, and they grabbed a bunch of people across Canada to form their team. Now, in the main Marvel Universe, it was kind of the same origin for them in the main Marvel Universe as well. But we do get to see a bunch of characters make their first appearances at this moment. Jubilee, Aurora, Vindicator, Snowbird, Sasquatch, Sunfire, and Shaman. Now, at first, Wolverine thinks that these guys are here for him because apparently they tried to recruit him in the past, except they are not here for him. They are here for John Paul, aka Northstar, the boyfriend of Colossus. And this is where we do get a few pages of the X-Men fighting against Alpha Flight, except this ends up with Alpha Flight winning this battle with the X-Men and taking John Paul with them. And there were 25 X-Men and only about 5 to 6 people on the Alpha Flight team, and they won so easily. This is where you have the X-Men regroup and try to think of a game plan on how to get John Paul back from Alpha Flight. Now, Colossus just wants to go and get them now to get back his boyfriend from them. But you have Cyclops remind Colossus that they just got their butt kicked by Alpha Flight easily. They need a plan here, but this is where you have Wolverine appear and tell us that Alpha Flight is using a drug called Banshee, which is a mutant growth hormone. If a human takes them, they will gain powers, but if a mutant takes them, well, it makes them stronger and give them extra abilities. Where we find out that Alpha Flight was able to defeat the X-Men because they were taking this Banshee drug and making themselves stronger. Now, the name Banshee may sound familiar to you because in the main Marvel Universe, Banshee was a member of the X-Men. It was not a drug. In the main Marvel universe, the mutant growth hormone is around, but it is just called MGH, and that is it. And so this is a little bit different from the main Marvel universe, but still the same drug concept to give people powers or give mutants a second ability. Now, Jean Grey realized that Colossus is acting weird, that he could be hiding something from them, and so you have her use her powers to read his mind to see what he is hiding. This is where we learn that Colossus' powers are different from his main Marvel Universe counterpart. And the reason why I say this is because we learn Colossus has been taking the Banshee drug for years. Ever since he was a young boy in Russia working for the mob, he was taking the drug because the drug gives him his super strength. That without the drug, he can only turn to metal, and that is it. But with the drug, he unlocked his secondary ability, his super strength. And so this leads into Colossus getting upset that Jean Grey read his mind. He was able to feel her inside his head. And so with him knowing, the next thing we see is Jean Grey flying through the walls of the mansion. And so this makes the other X-Men stop what they are doing to see what in the world is going on, only to find out that one of their own team members is a drug addict. And so this makes the other X-Men look at Colossus differently now, because this whole time he has been lying to them. And you have Jean Grey offer to help Colossus, except he denied her help. And he has a good reason too, because Jean Grey is doing what Charles Xavier did to the X-Men, using his powers on the X-Men without their permission. And so Jean Grey just read Colossus' mind without asking him. And so he asked her, how do we know that this is not the beginning of you using your powers to get whatever you want? And so you have Colossus say that he is done being an X-Men and he leaves the school. And to close the first chapter, you have Colossus grab his stuff and get ready to leave the mansion. Except that is when he is greeted by Cyclops saying that he wants to help Colossus find Jean-Paul and get him back. Now Colossus thinks that Cyclops is just trying to be a spy for the X-Men to make sure he does not do anything crazy. But you have Cyclops tell Colossus that he really wants to help. And so this leads to Colossus letting Cyclops help him out. Except you have Colossus tell Cyclops that he had formed his own X-Men team. And this team is using the Banshee drug to enhance their powers. And we see that it is Dazzler, Nightcrawler, Angel, and Rogue now using the drug as well. Now this story also gives us some information about Cyclops Past as well, where before this story we only got a small amount of information here and there throughout the Ultimate X-Men run. But we come to find out that when Cyclops was young, he was always bullied in school. But the most important part about his origin is that we learn about when Cyclops' powers manifest, because when they did manifest, it led to Cyclops' powers killing off his foster parents, literally turning them into dust. Now we do pick up in the present day with Colossus in his newly formed X-Men team in Siberia. Now they came here to make contact with Colossus' dealer, and so he can be able to get his hands on more of the Banshee drug. Now we do not get to see who the dealer is because they blindfolded Colossus, but we will learn who's behind this later on. But after Colossus made the deal and got his Banshee drug, you have Cyclops inject himself with the drug as well. But we come to find out that he faked the injection, and that he is actually a spy for the real X-Men, and they want to stop Colossus and his X-Men before they do something they will regret. We also find out that back at the school, Charles Xavier and Jean Grey are testing the rest of the students to see if they have been taking the Banshee drug as well, which of course all the tests came back negative except for one. and that person is Wolverine. Except Wolverine tells Jean Grey that he would never touch drugs, but there is some connection between him and the Banshee drug. Now, we do not venture into what the connection is between Wolverine and the Banshee drug. Instead, we pick up at the base of Alpha Flight, which is really Department H. The organization is always trying to make their own Canadian superhero team. But we pick up with Alpha Flight chilling and just hanging out in their base. Except they get attacked by Colossus and his X-Men team. Now this is where we get a few pages of the two sides fighting against each other. But we see that the X-Men who took the Banshee drug are still getting a handle on their new powers. And what I mean is that we see that at first they are able to get the edge on Alpha Flight because they started with a surprise attack. But Alpha Flight was able to regroup and start beating down on the X-Men. And with the X-Men beginning to lose this battle, Cyclops realized that he has no choice but to take the Banshee drug. And we learned that he faked the injection earlier to make it seem like he took the drug, but he did not. But with his fellow X-Men losing against Alpha Flight, it leads to him taking the drug. And with him taking the Banshee drug, of course, he is now able to control his optic beam. But also seems like he gained a little bit of extra strength as well. But while you have Cyclops taking on Alpha Flight by himself because the other X-Men were defeated and Colossus left them behind to find his boyfriend Jean-Paul, everyone realizes that there is a random earthquake happening at the moment. And that tells them it has to be Northstar. And with him being pumped with the Banshee drug, his powers have evolved to the point where he releases a high amount of vibrations that are literally shaking the area around him. And so you have Cyclops check up on Colossus and Jean-Paul to see what is happening. But when Cyclops finds them, he sees Colossus holding Jean-Paul and making it seem like that he had overdosed on the Banshee drug. Now the story once again shifts back to the past, but this time we are learning what happened to Jean Grey after the ending of the Apocalypse storyline. Remember that after she became the Phoenix and defeated the Apocalypse, she turned time back and healed everyone who was affected by the Apocalypse. But after she did that, she disappeared, and that was it. But then we got this story and she was back. Except throughout this story, the other X-Men stated that she was gone for 2 months. And so the question is, where has she been? Well, we learned that she traveled around in space and she was out there looking for something. But she does not tell us what she was looking for. Even when the Silver Surfer stops her in her tracks, asking her to go back to Earth, she tells him no, because she is looking for something. And she tells him that she is looking for heaven. But then we jump back into the present day, and we see some of the X-Men training in the Danger Room. But we learn that it has been some time since Colossus, Rogue, Cyclops, Dazzler, Angel, and Nightcrawler have left the school after getting addicted to the Banshee drug, where we learn that Jean Grey has taken over as the leader of the X-Men team now since Cyclops left with Colossus. Now in the middle of their Danger Room training, that is when you have Nightcrawler contact Jean Grey through his mind, begging for her help, stating that the X-Men who started to take the Banshee drug has now gotten addicted to the drug, and now they are going around doing things to get their hands on a large amount of the Banshee drug. But before Jean Grey is able to ask Nightcrawler more questions about what they are doing, Cyclops is able to detect that Nightcrawler is talking to Jean Grey, that the Banshee drug has evolved him to the point where he is able to see her in her astral form, and even attack her astral form as well. And this is stating that the drug is actually making him just as strong as Jean Grey when she is the Phoenix, where of course you have the Phoenix tell the X-Men that they have to stop the drug up X-Men. But we did pick up with Spider-Man and Kitty Pryde. And remember that Kitty Pryde left the X-Men, and then in Ultimate Spider-Man we saw her become a new kind of hero that works alongside Spider-Man. And we pick up with them going after this gang that has a shipment of the Banshee drug in their possession. But at the end of the fight, you have Wolverine appear, and there's a good reason why Wolverine is here for. Because Wolverine needs Spider-Man to look at Wolverine's blood to see if there is some kind of connection between Wolverine and the Banshee drug. Because earlier Jean Grey said that there is some kind of connection between the two. Plus Wolverine knows that Spider-Man is a genius. But you have Spider-Man tell Wolverine that the reason why Wolverine tests positive earlier for the Banshee drug is because Wolverine DNA was used to make the drug. Banshee is literally founded on Wolverine's DNA. But we pick up with Colossus and his X-Men back in Siberia, and this is where we see that they have hit a point where they want to quit the Banshee drug. But because their body is so addicted to Banshee, they cannot quit cold turkey. It will be a slow progress for them. But we also see that they have run out of money to buy more Banshee, food, or even a place to stay in. And so they have hit rock bottom. But this is where we see that Colossus finds out that Cyclops was a spy this whole time for the real X-Men team. Except you have Cyclops trying to show Colossus that they all need help because they have become fully addicted to the Banshee drug, that they all have hit rock bottom at this point. But Colossus is not listening to Cyclops. But while the two of them are arguing with one another, you have the actual X-Men team appear, and this begins the battle between the two X-Men team in this random building they are staying in. But we are also seeing that the X-Men team who is on the Banshee drug is actually giving their old teammates a challenge. They are even giving Jean Grey a problem as well. And she has the powers of the Phoenix in her right now. But we see that with her being beat down by Colossus, her mind goes into this state where she is greeted by her father, John Grey. And this is not her father really visiting her. This is just an image of her father appearing in her head. And this is where we finally get our answer to our question earlier in this video, where she was in space looking for something, and she only said she was looking for heaven, and we did not know why she was looking for heaven. But we came to find out that the reason why is because she wanted to bring her father back to life. This is where we learn that Jean Grey's father was around, but at the same time not around in her life. He devoted all his time in his work, but Jean Grey always tried to get her father's attention all the way up to the point where he died. But after her father died, that is when she met Charles Xavier, and he kind of became the father she always wanted. But you have Jean Grey tell her that she needs to let him go, that he was not a good father to her, and she needs to use her powers to protect her friends, rather than trying to bring him back. And then he leaves. But after all of that, Jean Grey just passed out, and she's out of the battle at this point. And so this leads to Wolverine getting upset because to him, this is Colossus' fault. If Colossus was not addicted to the Banshee drug, then there would not be any problems right now, and the X-Men would not be fighting against each other, but they are, and it's because of the Banshee drug. And this leads to the point where we see Wolverine use his claws on Colossus, and he cuts out Colossus's heart. Now, the story jumps back in time once again, except this time we pick up with Charles Xavier and Magneto in the Savage Land, where we all know at this point in Ultimate Marvel Universe, they were the two people who founded the Savage Land. And so we see them right now in the Savage Land, and they get confronted by a dinosaur. Except this is where we see Charles Xavier pop out claws like Wolverine and gets the healing factor of Wolverine as well. And so this is telling us that the Banshee drug has been around for years, and Charles Xavier was the one of the first few people to test the Banshee drug. But this leads to us finding out that Charles Xavier and Magneto were the ones who made the Banshee drug because it was able to give mutants secondary abilities, except their mind goes crazy. And since their minds go crazy, Charles Xavier shut the project down. But we also see that they had captured Wolverine, just using him as a test subject, but made him forget about this moment in time where he was being used for a new drug. This is where we pick back up in the present day, and we see that the X-Men are still fighting against each other. And honestly, this fight does last for a few more pages. We even get a moment where Colossus grabs Wolverine and rips his leg off, which is honestly kind of cool to see. But this is showing that the battle between the X-Men is getting way out of hand. And so you have Jean Grey pull out her wild card, which is John Paul, where we learn that he did not die earlier from the overdose, but thanks to the Banshee drug, he is now paralyzed from the waist down. And this made Colossus realize that what he has been doing is wrong, and he was hurting his own friends and going down a dark path. And so you have Colossus beg Jean Grey for help, and she agrees to help him, and the rest of the X-Men who were on the Banshee drug to go home as well. Now the only person who does not get on the jet to go back home is Cyclops, and for him it is hard to let go of the ability to be able to control his optic beam and actually see the world the way he's supposed to see the world. This is where we see Cyclops and Jean Grey go to space, and the reason why we see them in space is because with the Banshee drug, Cyclops had reached a point where his powers evolved with him being able to fly, to give him the ability to control solar energy around him, and that is why he is able to fly in space. But his powers are constantly evolving, and he is getting to the point where he is becoming stronger than Jean Grey. Except for him to be at this point, he has to keep taking the drug. And so when he starts to fight Jean Grey, he is able to go toe to toe with her at first, but then he reaches a point where he needs another injection of the Banshee drug to continue fighting and continue having the ability to breathe in space. And you had Jean Grey able to calm him down and have him come back home. Now we jump over to Muir Island, and this is where you have Wolverine arrive at the research center of Moira McTaggart, and this is where you have Wolverine confront the one person who had a hand of making the Banshee drug in the past, which of course was Charles Xavier. And so you have Wolverine attack Charles Xavier to ask him, why did he make the drug and why is he selling it to kids? And you have Charles Xavier tell Wolverine that he shut the project down years ago, so it was not him. And so Wolverine wonders who it is then, if it's not Charles Xavier. And then we find out that it was Moira McTaggart who made the drug. She did it because she was having a hard time paying the bills for her research lab. And so she continued to sell the drug to be able to afford the bills. And this hurts Charles Xavier more than Wolverine. Because remember, in this universe, Charles Xavier and Moira McTaggart were married and they had a son named David. But now seeing his ex-wife selling a drug that hurts mutants after he stopped the project years ago, it feels like a betrayal from her. But then you have the story revealed that Moira McTaggart has been using the drug as well. Remember, the drug does give regular human powers as well, and so she gained the ability of sonic screams. But it was not able to stop Wolverine, and he was able to get past her attack. Except this is where you have Wolverine tell her that what she has been doing is wrong, because she tells him that she was doing this to help mutants and make it safer for them as well. Except she made mutants drug addicts really. But you have Wolverine use his claws to make a spark in the lab, which leads into blowing up the lab and destroying all of the containers holding the Banshee drug. Now, she does not die, and Charles Xavier was able to use one of the other mutants there to teleport out of there before Wolverine blew up the lab, and so he is alive as well. But the biggest moment comes at the end of the book, where we see that Quicksilver visits Moira and tells her that his father Magneto has a plan to deal with the humans. Now this ending is confusing and does not make any sense really, because at the end of Ultimates 3, Quicksilver was killed. Also in Ultimates 3, in the beginning of the story, he was working with the Ultimates until the second chapter, and he switched sides to Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants. But the whole story took place in a fast setting where everything took place in back-to-back moments. And so this book is stating that in a small brief moment in the book, Quicksilver left real quick to see Moira and then went back to the Savage Land to help his father fight against the Ultimates. But this is the ending of this story. And so guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe for more comic book videos in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'm out of here and I will see you on the next comic book video. Later guys.